staring down a massive life change? Yeah, it basically feels like stepping off a cliff in the pitch dark. But what if that darkness is actually a blank canvas? What we find in Jobs' famous 2005 address to Stanford graduates is a surprisingly perfect survival guide for the unknown. It completely reframes how we look at failure, rejection, and the sheer panic of losing our way. It asks us to consider that our most painful setbacks might actually be the exact catalyst we need to move forward.
All right, let's dive into stage 1, the leap, or facing the unknown.
Let's be real for a second. When you actually take a leap, the immediate aftermath is rarely glamorous. For Jobs, taking the leap meant dropping out of Reed College to save his working-class parents' money. He had naively chosen a school that was incredibly expensive, and he just couldn't see the value in it. So he dropped out, and suddenly he had no plan. He didn't even have a dorm room anymore, so he was literally sleeping on the floor in his friends' rooms. He was returning glass Coke bottles just to get the 5-cent deposit so he could buy food. And every single Sunday night, he'd walk 7 miles across town just to get one decent meal at the local Hare Krishna temple. I mean, it was scary, it was gritty, but it was driven by this inner compass that he simply couldn't ignore.
And here's the thing about being in the thick of a transition. Your side quests often feel totally pointless at the time. Because Jobs had dropped his required classes, he started dropping in on a calligraphy class purely out of curiosity. He learned all about serif and sans serif typefaces and the really subtle artistry of the space between letters. Now, studying this had absolutely zero practical application in his life at the time. It was just a passion project. But an incredible thing happened a whole decade later. When he was designing the very first Macintosh computer, it all came back to him. He designed beautiful typography directly into the Mac, which effectively changed personal computing forever.
Which brings us to this. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. When you're in the middle of a major pivot, it is literally impossible to see how today's mess will become tomorrow's masterpiece. You just have to trust that the dots will eventually connect. Believing in your gut, your destiny, or your intuition. That's what gives you the confidence to step off the well-worn path and follow your heart, even when it makes absolutely no sense to anyone else around you.
Moving on to stage 2, the setback, and starting over again.
Now, sometimes you take that leap and it works. Jobs found his passion early. He and Wozniak started Apple in a garage when he was just 20 years old. They worked relentlessly, and in just 10 years, it exploded from 2 guys in a garage into a massive $2 billion empire with over 4,000 employees. They had just released their finest creation. Jobs had just turned 30. I mean, he was at the absolute pinnacle of his industry.
And then, the unthinkable. He was fired from the very company he created. Visions diverged with a hired executive, and the board of directors actually sided against Jobs. The entire focus of his adult life was just gone in an instant. If you've ever had the rug pulled out from under you, you know this feeling, that devastating, deeply public pain of a transition you didn't ask for. It was so bad he even contemplated running away from Silicon Valley entirely.
But as the dust settled, Jobs realized something profound, and honestly, this is a radical mindset shift. He realized that the rejection didn't actually change his passion. He found that losing his company had actually freed him. The heavy burden of being quote-unquote successful completely evaporated, and it was replaced by the sheer lightness of being a beginner again. He was less sure about everything, which meant he was entirely open to anything.
You know, this awful-tasting medicine was exactly what the patient needed. Free from all those external expectations, he entered the most creative era of his life. He founded a company called Next. He built Pixar, which, of course, went on to create Toy Story. He fell in love with a woman named Lorene, who became his wife. None of this, not the innovation, the family, or his eventual triumphant return to Apple, none of it would have happened without that devastating failure.
So that brings us to stage 3, the ultimate perspective, or the change agent.
When you're standing at the edge of a big transition, the fear of judgment can totally paralyze you. So how do you make a choice? Well, Jobs relied on this staggering 33-year daily routine. Every single morning, he would look in the mirror and ask himself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And whenever the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew a transition was required. This simple, actionable morning habit is just brilliant. It instantly strips away all your pride and fear, leaving only what actually matters to you.
To truly navigate change, we kind of have to acknowledge our final shared destination. Jobs viewed death not as some morbid end, but as life's ultimate change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, you are the new, but eventually you will become the old. Recognizing this vulnerability is absolutely the best way to realize you actually have nothing to lose.
Because your time is finite, you are already naked. All the things holding you back right now,
The fear of what people think, the fear of a financial dip, the fear of completely failing, they all just fall away in the face of the bigger picture. Death, as Jobs noted, forces us to get moving. It forces us to stop living a life that isn't authentic to us and to boldly step into that scary new chapter.
All right, bringing us to the conclusion, following your heart.
If you are in the messy, confusing middle of a transition right now, consider this your personal blueprint. First off, your time is limited, so please don't waste it living someone else's life. Avoid the trap of dogma, which is really just living with the results of other people's thinking. When you start over, trust me, everyone is going to have an opinion. Do not let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. You have to have the courage to follow your heart and your intuition, because somehow they already know what you truly want to become.
And that brings us to his iconic sign-off. Stay hungry, stay foolish. This is your ultimate call to action for the scary chapter you're facing right now. Stay hungry enough to keep pushing forward, and foolish enough to embrace the lightness of being a total beginner. Be open to the unpredictable, absolutely beautiful journey ahead of you.
So we want to leave you with this final thought. Yes, starting over is terrifying. And yes, the path forward is probably completely unclear. But the dots will connect. So take a look at that blank canvas in front of you and ask yourself, what will you do with your new beginning? Thanks for joining us for this explainer. We'll catch you next time as we uncover more insights to help you navigate your world.